Okay, now we're good. Now I can share. And there we go. So here's just a real quick survey. I know Bridget put the participants copy in the slides for you, in the chat box. I'm sorry, in the chat box for you. The first one is just a real quick survey, I think 3 or 4 questions, just for us to kind of get a real good baseline of what you know about Universal Design for Learning and the DTGSS. I'm going to keep talking, but if you're doing that, that should not take you long at all. So as I mentioned, we work at the Delaware MTSS TA Center, which is housed at the University of Delaware. We serve as the technical assistance provider for the Delaware Department of Education. So we do a lot of collaboration with the different work groups at DOE, and we support their work, and they have always been very supportive of the work that we do as well. Just want to give a shout out to our partners there. Some agreements that we have today, I'm not going to read these to you, but if you could just take a moment and reflect on these and make sure that you are okay for the next hour and a half, that we can agree to these agreements. So just a couple that I just want to point out. Number one, just if you could please enter, with an open mind and remain positive, and that we're all here for the best of intentions, which is to help all students learn. Although this is the MLL conference, we are really thinking about all students achieving the best that they can. We have a few websites and a crosswalk tool that we will be referring to later, but they're here for you in one place. The DTGSS website on the DOE website will be a great place that has lots of information for you. We will talk about the UDL and DTGSS crosswalk tool that we have. And then for those of you that are interested in learning more about UDL, the link to the CAST website is here as well. And we're going to walk you through these. So you don't need to, dive into them right now. We're going to take it one step at a time here. Here's our agenda for our time together. We did our introductions. We're going to dive into an introduction of UDL. And then we're going to talk a little bit about DTGSS. Since schools are using it, I know that, you probably have some knowledge on it. We're just going to hit on it real quick and then really dive into the alignment between UDL and DTGSS. We have a practice activity using that crosswalk tool. We will reflect together, and then we'll ask for feedback at the very end. So we like to always ground ourselves in the professional learning standards that we need to abide by. And these are our standards here that are given to us from the Learning Forward. And specifically, this PD will look at implementation within the transformational process. So when we talk about implementation, we want to make sure that our professional learning results in equitable and excellent outcomes for all students. And we know that'll happen when educators understand and apply research on change management, when educators engage in feedback processes, and educators implement and sustain professional learning. So what we want is for you to take today and take one thing and try to apply it tomorrow in your professional practice. So that's really our focus for today. Our goals, we're going to talk about really the 3 key elements of UDL, which are goals, variability, and context. As I said, we're going to look at the connection, that alignment between UDL and DTGSS, and then we will be able to recognize this in action and really take a look at what that looks like for us. Okay, and one of the important parts of Universal Design for Learning is to have you set your own goals. So I told you my goals for today. And what I'd like for you to do is just to take a second to reflect on any goal that you have for yourself today. So your goal could be something academic, maybe it's something behavioral or social. Some things to think about, are you ready for today's PD, is your space conducive to learning? Do you need to maybe put your phone down, or, if you're grading papers or something, put those aside for the next hour and a half. Reflect on what you already know about UDL, and maybe what you already know about DTGSS. You probably have some experience with those. So if you'd like to just take a second, reflect, set your own personal goal, that would be fabulous. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about where UDL came from. So Universal Design for Learning came out of it was like the early 1970s. It was the architectural movement with civil rights that happened for students, or for people in the community, everyone that had disabilities, making sure that they had access to the architecture, to the buildings, to the sidewalks, to things that they needed in order to be a productive member of society. So you can see here, as I'm pulling up some of these images, some of these architectural movements were out of universal design. So you can see, the place here in the upper left for maybe strollers or carts or a wheelchair to get up into that space. There's, different crosswalks. We have automatic doors now. Just some real things that maybe we take for granted, that we see every day. This didn't happen until the early 1970s, out of this universal design movement. Then years later came closed captioning, and we see lots of different things, like, for maybe people who need the closed captioning on TVs or on their computers. All of these are part of the universal design to make sure that everyone has access to what they need. Now, this is, I took my nieces to a park close to where I live, and it's one of the can-do playgrounds that are popping up a lot around the state. And when I saw this universally designed play environment, I was like, oh my gosh, this is another example of universal design. So thinking about all children and how they have access to participate, in that playground environment. So it's really just a fabulous thing that that we're even seeing now in the community. So what happened is this movement in architecture shifted into the education system. And what Universal Design for Learning says is that we are now educators, teachers are now the architects because we are designing those lessons that make the environment, the material, the curriculum, whatever it is we're working with, accessible for all. So why universal design for learning? Let's take us a few minutes and think about that. We all have these classrooms who are filled with students who have different needs. They come from different educational backgrounds, have different attention spans and interests, different language abilities, different cultural backgrounds. All of these are, these students are sitting with us, and we have to be able to meet their needs, every single one of their needs. So thinking about how we can do that and what that would look like, Universal Design for Learning definitely gives us a framework that will help us address that. So Universal Design for Learning is a proactive framework. It is not reactive. So a lot of the concepts that we're talking about here come at the forefront. They come in the planning sessions. And that is why when we meet with teachers and we are working with teachers on developing lesson plans on that, we have to do the planning. That is an extremely important part of our curriculum that we're following here. So it's, really thinking about making that information and learning accessible to all. We are thinking in advance about learning preferences. There is a large amount of research now that says, that we should be saying learning preferences and not learning styles, because learning preferences implies that it can change. When we say learning styles, that kind of implies that every child is going to need to learn this one way in every environment that they're in, whether it's math or reading or music or whatever it is. So when we say learning preferences, that kind of opens it up a little bit more to, depending on the environment or maybe depending on their needs that day. So there's a lot of research using the terms learning preferences now. Thinking about our classroom environment, is our environment set up the best way that it can for students to learn? We think about the instructional strategies and the curricular materials that we're using, and any adaptations that need to be made as well. We're really thinking about making sure our students are college and career ready, ready for that next step after the K-12 experience for them. And we're thinking about fostering expert learning and thinking, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. And one of the great things I like to really emphasize here is that it's a way to challenge assumptions made about learning and teaching. So we, as educators, myself included in that bucket, have some assumptions that we make. I am better about that now, but thinking about years ago, when I was maybe an earlier teacher, you kind of have those assumptions about some students. And this challenges that. This challenges our thinking made about that. And, whether, that student can't do this, that student isn't ready to learn that, it really does challenge that educator thinking. I love this quote by Mirko Chardin and Katie Novak. And if you don't know those names, I highly encourage you to investigate their names. That's Mirko, Mirko, Chardin and Katie Novak. This was a quote from them. The UDL framework was designed to eliminate inequities, not perpetuate equality. And I think that's just so powerful to think about that. So when we're talking about equality, it's all people have equal value as individuals and really equal inputs and equal outputs. It's really what, everyone is kind of getting the same thing here. When we're talking about equity, everyone has what they need to be successful. And it's thinking about that fair distributed principle where marginalized students will need more inputs to have similar outputs that students with power and privilege have. So really thinking about what that looks like for our students. And what groups of people are we talking about here? We're talking about Black, brown, poor, emotional needs, behavioral needs, learning or physical disabilities, our ELL, MLL population, LGBTQ population. These are the students that we're thinking about when we're talking about this. This is maybe familiar to some of you. This is a MTSS visual to kind of help us think about what we're thinking about with UDL and within the MTSS world here. And, and in Delaware, we have to always refer back to our MTSS needs and what we're doing for our students. But here thinking about UDL and differentiated instruction and integrated. UDL and differentiated instruction are different. And then thinking about how that is integrated. So at the bottom tier, which is our tier 1, we're talking about all students receiving universal support. We're talking about some students receiving additional support. And then there are a few students receiving intensified support. So this is just a really great visual to kind of really think about where UDL lives here, as well as differentiated instruction and any other integrated programs that you have that we might think about. I'm going to pause for a second and ask you to read this quote. The state of Delaware has a partnership now with SWIFT out of the University of Kansas, talking about rightful presence. Two of our DOE colleagues, Lauren Irwin and Susan Venema, yesterday did a presentation on rightful presence. And I'm not sure if any of you were able to see it, but we are a part of that work. And I'm just going to pause for a second, ask you to read the quote, and pick out a couple of words or phrases that stand out to you. And if you could put them in the chat, and Bridget can kind of help us see what you're saying there. So just drop in the chat any key words, key phrases that kind of stand out to you here.
That word belonging and true belonging is a phrase Kristi is coming up a bunch.
Awesome.
Power to invite, environment first. Lots around belonging and that culture of belonging.
Awesome. Great. So I think rightful presence is definitely going to be a term that we as educators are going to hear a lot of in Delaware and hopefully, nationwide. But it is a key term that we're hearing a lot coming from our colleagues at DOE out of this SWIFT work. So we're gonna. I love that term. I think it's awesome. I think it's just a great kind of goes beyond inclusion. I think it really just kind of pushes us beyond that. Awesome. Okay. Just to let you know, UDL is in some of our federal and state legislations and recommendations. So, I'm not going to read these to you, but it is specifically said UDL specifically and or UDL type language. So, really thinking about what it is mentioned. We are partners with the Delaware MTSS group. We are mentioned in the early literacy plan. So, it is something that it's not going away. It's not going anywhere. So that's great news because it is such a powerful framework. I have to take a second and really make sure that we mention MTSS. We're not going to spend tons of time on it because I certainly hope that this isn't familiar. I'm sorry, that this isn't new, but let's just kind of take a second and take a look at this. We're talking about the whole child. So when we're talking about that whole child, we're thinking about academic and non-academic needs of the student. We're talking about professional learning, and we're talking about the family engagement as well. So really bringing all of those pieces together to work with that child, to make sure that every aspect of that child's life is considered when making a plan for that child. So, what are some things that that you notice, that you wonder about this graphic? And again, you can put it right in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself. We're a nice small group, so we're all friendly here, whichever you would like. What are some things that really stand out to you, or maybe in the context of your job, or maybe just thinking about your heart. What is it that's standing out to you? Or if you have a wondering, I may not have the answer, but something to think about, something that you wonder about it.
I think for me, the biggest thing that I feel and notice and struggle with as a leader is that family engagement piece. And what I mean by that struggle is in educating them in the process as well, because they have that misinformation of where they know their child's struggling, they automatically want them to have an IEP. And not understanding the process of what this looks like, and the implementation of less invasive supports to try to support them prior to going down that path if need be. So I think that's the one place where I spend a lot of time, is just kind of working and educating the parent on this process, and supporting them of what it looks like, and kind of what it means. And then where do we go from there? But we have to wait for the data to tell us where to go.
Absolutely. That's great. Yeah. Educating the parents. Yeah, that's a big part.
I think what stands out for me is that the high quality core, like that has to be at the center of it.
Absolutely. The HQIM. Yeah. Great. Everyone is a tier 1 student. Just because a student maybe moves it and receives that tier 2 or that targeted, they don't lose that tier 1. It is in addition to, it's an additional support. So, you know, kind of builds on each other that way. So, that building up that tier 1 material, that, you know, that high quality core material, as you mentioned, that's key to have that. So super, thanks for sharing. Okay. One thing I do want to mention, Nicole, you mentioned that you were an administrator. I'm not sure what other people's roles are, but you know, universal design for learning can be used in all 3 tiers. So, you know, when you're thinking about the doing your observations or providing feedback to teachers, consider going in at not just that tier 1 time, but also in those other tiers as well. If it looks different, you know, observe what's going on there. Think about what kind of feedback you can provide that teacher in the other tiers, not just that tier 1. I mean, obviously providing the feedback in tier 1 is important, but also consider, you know, kind of stepping out of that and looking at some of the other ones. So just wanted to mention that. And you know, I like this visual too when we're thinking about MTSS. These are all of the things that are kind of encompassed there. You know, all of it, there's so much happening when we say MTSS that we really have to, you know, kind of have that big open mind, and all of these are affecting that child. So that's that whole child. Every single one of these things has to be taken into consideration. Great. So again, just a little side by side here to think about what this looks like for universal design for learning. You know, we're thinking about what are the students interested? How do we get them interested? You know, what's the effort, the persistence, the self-regulation? How are you presenting the material? How are you allowing the students to show you what they have learned? It's, you know, really thinking about that variability, and it's eliminating the barriers in the curriculum. And MTSS, again, it's that whole child. It's very similar to what we're just talking about here. We're designing our instruction, our environment, so that we're meeting the needs of all of the diverse learners. And thinking about that high quality instruction, the pacing, the timing. Are we still providing rigor for every child, no matter where they are? Are we challenging them? And are we making that content relevant? So all of these are just super important concepts that we need to keep thinking about. I'm going to talk a little bit about goals here. Put up here this Hattie effect size. There's also Marzano. I personally am in kind of the John Hattie camp here when we're thinking about what teacher practices have the biggest impact on student learning. And John Hattie did a study about this. And anything over a 0.4 is considered really, really an important teacher practice. So for a Hattie effect size to have a 0.68, that's really important. When we're talking about writing goals for students, and we're not talking, I'm sorry, we're not talking IEP goals here, okay? We're talking learning goals. We should mention that because sometimes that gets a little confusing. When we're writing learning goals, we want to make sure that they're clear and understandable. Are there different ways that students can meet that goal? Are they relevant, and are they rigorous? So let's take a look like what we're talking about here. So when we're talking about separating the means, we all want to have the same goal, but allowing for students to get there in a different way if needed. Okay, so we all want to go to Rehoboth Beach. Okay, how I get to Rehoboth Beach might be different than how Bridget gets to Rehoboth Beach, but we're all going to get there. Okay, so that's what we're thinking about here. We want to make sure that we're providing some options in the materials, maybe in the methods, in the assessments. How are we addressing that variability and letting students get to that goal in the way that they can? So here's a standard goal that you might see, you know, a teacher say. we're gonna write a paragraph summarizing key events of a story. Pretty straightforward. Look what happens when we can open this up to identify key events of a story and what that can look like for a student. Right off the bat, the barrier of writing, that can be an issue for some students. So if we change that verb to identify, there's so many different ways that a student could identify the key events of a story. Okay. Here's a math example with writing again. If we write a number sentence, or what happens when we can identify a number sentence, okay? Really opening up this possibility. One of the really neat things, though, I have to say, is one of the, we do some work with world language teachers, and this is one of their standards. And I think this is so awesome. Novice learners in middle school and high school can identify, discuss, and produce types of artwork, crafts, graphic representations, etc. But those verbs there are very flexible. You know, they're very, students can identify in a lot of ways. They could discuss in a lot of ways. They can produce lots of different things. So I just think it's interesting, and I think it's really awesome, like if we think about these standards here, that they really are very flexible. Here's a music example, because we've done some training with some music teachers. And here was one of the goals that that was written by them again. So being able to write. So I'm going to come to this slide here. We like to think of verbs in two different ways: flexible and constricted. Okay. So if you take a look down the left-hand side of the flexible verbs, choose, clarify, create, describe, answer, those are not a one and done, this is how you can do this way, right? Constricted verbs are really, you're going to decode one way, might be a little bit of flexibility, but you're going to, multiply. Of course, we can let students multiply in different ways. Recite. These are verbs that are a little bit more constricted, and that is okay. And there is a time for that. There's definitely a time where we want students to graph, and we want students to multiply, and we want students to write. But I'm just asking you to consider, does it have to be, is the purpose of that goal to have them multiply? Or is it maybe you could think about it in a more flexible way? So just to really kind of think about that verb is super important when we're thinking about writing learning goals. Okay, so here's another example. If you have a someone that's saying, let's write a paper that defends school uniforms. Okay, look at what happens when we change that goal to say, let's prepare an argument that defends school uniforms. That could be maybe, they want to give a speech, or maybe they want to record themselves. Maybe they want to orally say something. Maybe they do want to write it, and that's fine. So thinking about how that just changing that verb and that verbal phrase there really opens up a lot of possibilities for some of our students. So we're going to do a little activity here, and hopefully you're following along and you have this up so we can go in. What I'm going to ask you to do is visit this Padlet, and I'll open it up in a second. And I want you to think about how else can students do this skill, okay? So you can write it, if you want to take a photo of something, you want to search for an image, whatever. So I'm going to open up the Padlet. And Bridget, you might be able to drop that in the chat as well, maybe, like if.
Already done.
Oh,
Yeah, it's in there
of
for
course
you.
it is. Of course it is. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to go to the Padlet site here and drop some different ways that students can do this. So for instance, if I go to compare, I would click on the plus sign, and this comes up, and I'm going to say, make a Venn diagram. and then publish. Okay. Let's see if I'm going to show you some options here. If you don't know Padlet yet, it's really great. You can type here. You could put a link to something that maybe you've done. You could take a picture of something. You can search for an image. It takes you right to the web. So Padlet is a really great tool to share and to use it with students. So let's see what everybody can think of. Let's make a nice list of some different things students could do here. Circle or point to identify, yep. Describe, label a picture. A double bubble graphic organizer, that's fun to say. Oh, great. Right. Super. So lots of different ways that we could do this. So as I said, you know, those constricted verbs, it's okay. There are times when you want to use them. But I would just ask you to consider and maybe work, you know, if you're in a position as a coach or an administrator, to think about, you know, thinking, having your educators, your teachers think about, is that the best verb to use here? You know, depending on what the outcome is. So this is great. Awesome. I will say Padlet, if you don't have that, Padlet used to be free. I don't think it's free anymore. I think since COVID, so many of these free tech tools that we used to use and take for granted, then they just started charging. I think they saw economics there, but it's a really great tool. There's lots of different ways that you could use this. So thank you for participating in that. That's a great list. Okay. So again, we want to make sure that our goals are aligned to our instructional activities as well as the assessment. You know, we just want to make sure that there's just this nice little triangle that all three of these are related and always aligned to one another. When we're thinking about assessment, look at this Hattie effect size, a 0.75. It's huge. Again, very, very important teacher practice to get the biggest bang for your buck, basically, when you're working with students. So we want to think about giving our students, as well as us as teachers, times to reflect. So as a teacher, I'm going to reflect, did I miss any barriers? You know, in my planning, did I miss something? You know, was there something that I should do next time I teach this activity? Is there something better I could do? What went well? You know, what's your cause for celebration? We have to celebrate the good stuff too. And then what changes would you make next time? You know, put a sticky note or something in your book or in your lesson plan book, you know, to make sure that you have, that you're able to reflect on that. And we also want to give students a chance to reflect. What was it that they learned? How was their effort? You know, did they put in the best effort? Why not? And have them build in that reflection time. So self-reflection for teachers and for our students is super important. Okay, let's talk a little bit about variability here. So Bridget, you want to take over here?
Sure, we're going to go ahead and jump into a couple of breakout groups. So we have a nice small group here, which is awesome and makes for hopefully some good conversations. So we're going to put you in a couple groups, and Kristi has some prompts here on the screen for you. I'll copy and paste them so that they're in the chat as well for you to see. And so what we're going to do is give you about 5 minutes. So it's 1:13 now. So we'll come back at about 1:18, 1:19 by the time you get into your group. And we'd love for you to just discuss these prompts. So which of these things would be most difficult for you to learn and which might be the easiest for you to learn, really getting into this idea of variability. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create those rooms. It should pop up for you right now. Right, so once you get there, feel free to introduce yourself to your colleagues and we'll pull you back in 5 minutes. Hopefully that went through. I'm going to send a 2-minute broadcast, okay?
Okay.
And then I'll close them because it does the 60-second closeout. So I'll close them when your timer gets to 1 minute. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hit close. Okay, so people will
Yep.
probably start
Yep.
coming back. You're doing great.
I hope I'm not going too fast. Like sometimes, like I want to make sure we get through everything and And if we get done early, then great, but, Victoria, I love your background. That's so cool. I love how that looks neat. I like that. I love
So I,
people's
yeah,
backgrounds.
that background is actually used on many of my PowerPoints when I'm presenting visuals to the children. So normally it has
Gotcha.
artwork on there, but for the day, it's my little chalkboard.
Gotcha. Oh, okay. Timer's up. That was groovy. That was the groovy timer. Okay. So I'm anxious to hear. Who'd like to share let's hear some difficult ones, and I could probably figure this out, but anybody want to share a difficult one?
I'll go. I think in our group we had two of us learning the trigonometry,
Yep,
and I will very much speak for myself, but not going past geometry. I think trigonometry will be very much a challenge.
me as well. Me as well. Yeah, good. So then the next question is, if you had to learn it, what do you think? What kinds of tools, what kinds of accommodations, what would help? What kind of supports would you need in order to learn that?
I'll take some visuals on that in both a written format and a video.
Mm-hmm.
Numerous examples, lots of repetition and practice would be right up my alley.
There you go. There you go. There you go. I love it. Did anyone pick a different one other than trigonometry? That always seems to be the winner.
Our
I
group
said, oh, go ahead. You could go.
okay. Our group talked about the article and that it would truly depend on like what topic the article was about. And if it was like more on like the scientific side or like a topic that we're not familiar with, that we would want to have visuals to be able to assist in the learning and the understanding of the article.
Absolutely. Great point. Great point. So interest, maybe background knowledge, all of those come into play here. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's great. Jacqueline, were you going to share something as well?
I was just typing it in. I also chose, although I love to read, but I was just putting myself in my students' shoes. And then also when I take my graduate courses, sometimes if the interest is not there, sometimes I have to maybe chunk the article, look at keywords,
Yes.
that kind of thing. Maybe even use a graphic organizer to kind of put my thoughts, you know,
Yeah,
in separate categories. So something like that, you know.
love it. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Great. How about what would be the easiest for you to learn? Anybody want
I
to
would say a dance. I may not be good at it, but I mean, I can follow. I can follow along
Sure.
and figure it out, you know.
Right.
And then it's always improv, so
There,
I think I got it. I'm good.
there you go. There you go. Yeah. So you'd like to do it, right? I mean, there's your interest is there. It's fun, it's engaging, all of that fun stuff, right? Um, awesome. Anybody else have something to share?
I think anytime something feels like a game to kids, to students, they're more engaged.
Yeah.
Even if it's hard, if it's a game, they're willing to try.
Yes. Agreed. That's great. That's great.
Well, I mentioned, I think all of us can check off on our bucket list how we did the learning a new tech tool, because I think COVID put us all through that. So I don't know about you, but I'm motivated and confident. Throw a tech tool in front of me and I'm going to play with it, even if
You
I don't know
are
what I'm doing,
so
but I'm going to
right.
play with that. I
You are
think
so
tech tools
right.
we can all very much kind of stay at ease with.
That's right. You are so right. Yeah. So it's when you were talking about dancing, Jacqueline, my kids had the same first grade teacher, and she taught them to learn the months of the year by doing the Macarena. So it's like January, February, March, April. So, and my son still sometimes I see him like doing those movements. Like they would do it every morning in their Monday meeting, and it was just so great. And we were just laughing at him not too long ago because we were talking about months and like going on vacation this summer, and oh, it was just hilarious. So it like it sticks, it sticks. So it is so important. So just even within our group, right, we have students, we have our participants, that are very varied, with some of the things that maybe you're interested in, some of your background knowledge. All of this is just to make the point that same thing when we're dealing with our students in our classrooms. So again, not going to read this list to you, but just take a look at this list of, the learner variability and all of these students that sit in our classrooms, and we have to address their needs, every single one of them. We can't let one student slip. We can't ignore one student. Oh, sorry, you don't have the background knowledge, so you can't participate in this. Or sorry, you're having an emotionally bad day at school. You can't, you're not going to be able to learn this. So really thinking about this list and all of these students that are here with us is just so important, and really something that, really drives our work. So when we're thinking about barriers, we're thinking about what is preventing our students from accessing the curriculum, expressing what they know, or engaging with the curricula. So really thinking about any of those things that are getting in the way, right? That's what a barrier is, it's getting in the way. So what is it that's getting in the way? We cannot blame the student. We have to blame the environment, and that environment could be maybe the classroom setup, maybe some of their, maybe they don't have the background knowledge that they need. Maybe they're not sure what that vocabulary word means. All of those are barriers to their learning, but we have to plan in advance to address them and to remove them. If a student is coming to us and maybe doesn't know the background knowledge that they need, then let's provide it to them real quick. We can find a quick video, or maybe, do a quick little read aloud or something to kind of give them some of that background knowledge. So this quote is so UDL, and it is really at the heart that the barrier is in the environment and not in the student. So we have to stop blaming the students for what they can't do. And I put quotes up about that, right? We've got to be real careful about what we're saying here. So we put it on real big to make sure we hit home with this quote here. So let's dive in a little bit about UDL. So just talked about barriers, and what it is it's thinking about multiple means of engagement, representation, and action and expression, which we'll talk about what that means here. It's based on years and years of brain science. So thinking about the multiple means of engagement. So that is really thinking about the affective networks of our brain, which is why. Why am I learning this? Why is it important for me to learn this? So really thinking about that, that why, that relevancy piece. We're thinking about how learners get engaged and then stay engaged and motivated throughout the lesson when something gets hard, because something's going to get hard for all of us. How are they challenged? How are they excited? How are they interested? So that's really what we're thinking about here. The multiple means of representation is thinking about the recognition networks. So that's the what. So what am I doing? How am I going to teach the student this? What am I going to do with the information that I've learned? Okay. How am I going to gather what I need to gather? How am I going to organize it in my brain? When I see it, when I hear it, when I read it, how am I going to make sense of all of this? Okay. And then lastly is the strategic networks, which is how How am I going to use this information? What am I going to do with it? How am I going to show you what I have learned? How can I express to you what I've learned here? So these three networks is really where Universal Design for Learning comes from. This is the UDL graphic organizer. And when people think of UDL, this often comes to mind if you have a little bit of background knowledge about UDL. Just a little side note, they're actually currently updating it and really putting in more equity pieces here. So stay tuned. It is not completed yet. They have some different stakeholder groups put together to kind of get some information, some input, and they are in the process of updating this, which is fabulous, because they felt that maybe the equity piece isn't explicitly addressed here. So stay tuned, and as soon as we hear that the new one is released, we'll make sure that we get the message out to the state. But this is what we're thinking about here. So we have 3 principles here. Okay, so we have our providing multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression. Within each of the 3, we have these guidelines. So we have for engagement, we're providing options in recruiting interest, providing options for sustaining effort and persistence, and providing options for self-regulation. In the purple, in representation, it's asking teachers to provide options for perception, language and symbols, and options for comprehension. In the blue, the action and expression, it's providing options for physical action, options for expression and communication, and options for executive functioning. Okay, so all of this is really coming together here to create the goal, which is at the very bottom. We want to create expert learners who are purposeful and motivated, resourceful and knowledgeable, and strategic and goal-directed. Okay. You can think of it as kind of very loosely an I do, we do, you do type model. So let me go back one here for a second. So here's our graphic organizer. Okay, so across the top you see the word access. Options for recruiting interest, perception, and physical action. That's kind of the I do, where I'm modeling a lot of this work. On the second row is where we're having the students build their knowledge through practice and internalizing those skills. So that's the guided practice piece that we do. And then at the bottom is where they internalize it, where they're able to have that independent practice, or that, I do, we do, you do. Okay. So really thinking about it that way might be helpful. What I'm going to do is pause for a minute and just give you a second to kind of take a look at the graphic organizer. I think Bridget's going to put a copy if you need it in the chat, but I just want you to take a look at them. Okay, look at the different pieces, the different checkpoints. What is standing out to you? What do you notice? If and reflect on your the age level that you work with, your role. Are you an elementary teacher where you kind of teach more than one subject? Are you a high school math or high school science? Like, I don't know what your experiences are, but relate it to you and what it is that you see that affects you and that impacts your work today. So I'm just going to give you just a few minutes just to kind of take a look. What do you notice? What's standing out? You can either unmute yourself or drop it in the chat if you'd like. Bridget can share with the group. Anybody see anything that's like standing out to you that we should point out? Anything hitting home?
I'll go. I initially it was a little overwhelming to
Mhm.
kind of think about how to look at it, but once you said to use the I do, you do, and we do,
Mhm.
or vice versa, I do, we do, and you do, it made it easier. So now I can understand that third row because I wasn't really sure about that. So when I look across and I think that's where the students are actually self-regulating
Yes.
and kind of checking in with themselves, you know,
Mhm.
I think it makes it easier. So that kind of stood out to me.
Yeah. And the executive functioning piece too, that kind of,
Yeah.
am I on track and being able to self-reflect and make goals and have what they need? So thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, I was looking
And-
at it more so at myself, but then I didn't put it into the student's perspective and I said, oh, okay. So
Yeah.
now it makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah. So when we work with schools or teachers, we typically try to stay when we first start in the green with the engagement. Because really thinking, we got to get our students engaged, or anything else we do doesn't really matter, right? So when we work with schools, when we work with groups of teachers, we really try to stay in the green area, in that engagement piece, to really think about getting students, engaged, motivated, pushing through when things get hard. I do want to notice, and we don't have time today, but this link, if you wanted to find more information, later, these are live links here. So you can go, okay, well, what does that mean? Optimize individual choice and autonomy. And you can click on that and you can read a little bit more about it. So there, this is we wanted to share this resource with you here. So you can always go back and take a look at it. Okay. Sorry. Did anyone else have anything else to share? Okay. Um, okay, so I want to stop and have you kind of reflect as a whole here. Um, Bridget, I don't see you. There you are. Sorry. Um, this is a shared Google document. So, Bridget, I think dropped it in the chat. I'm sure she did. And what we're going to ask you to do is to just go to this shared Google Doc, and I'm going to ask you to just take, a minute or two and reflect. So we put a few sentence starters if you're not sure how to get started. So I think UDL is, I think UDL is not. UDL could help me support my MLL students by, I would like to learn more about, or anything else that you're thinking. So I would just choose a line. I'm gonna say Kristi, and I'm gonna say, I think UDL is great. So just pick any row and you can put your name and reflect. Yeah, great. I'd like to see your initial thoughts. Again, unfortunately, this is only an hour and a half and we're down to about 20 minutes. So, you know, there's so much more we could talk about. But hopefully it is piquing your interest and, you know, thinking about what you could do, you know, with UDL. If at the end Bridget and I can share our email addresses with you, and if you're interested in learning more, maybe interested in learning, wanting some more resources, please reach out, send us an email. We can share some other resources with you. Be happy to do that. There are Schoology modules that are for intro, and then we have an advanced Schoology modules. So I'm currently updating those, and but they are on there now, but I've been spending some time trying to get some updated resources on there as well. So I think it's great. It's great. Awesome. That's great. Good. I'm glad that getting some positive comments here. Like I said, please reach out after this. I'm happy to share some other resources with you. I'm going to jump back to the okay. Okay, so we'll spend the rest of our time kind of thinking about DTGSS and how it aligns. So just gonna ask, how do your beliefs influence you as a teacher? So we'll spend a few minutes thinking about that. So there's really two schools of thought here. So, you know, the first one is that innate ability. So you're born with your intelligence, right? It's a thing, it is fixed. You are responsible for your successes and your failures. So it's that your innate ability, you're born with it. And then there's that other school of thought, that effort-based ability theory, so that it's not fixed. It's built through that effort, and it's influenced by the expectations and confidence that students have. So really thinking about those two schools of thought, we want to really make sure that we're in this growth mindset thoughts. I think for time purposes, Bridget, I don't see you. There you are.
I'm here.
Do we want to go in the breakout rooms again?
That's up to you. If you're ready to keep moving, that's fine.
I think let's just kind of take a second, I think, just to kind of save some time since we're down to the wire here. We were going to have you choose one of these prompts to discuss with your groups, but let's take a few minutes and see if, you know, drop it in the chat or unmute yourself. Just thinking about your mindset, you know, how does a teacher's belief about the capacity of students to learn affect the decisions they make and the actions they take? Or how do our beliefs and perceptions about a child's culture affect our beliefs about that individual's capacity to grow and achieve? Anybody have any thoughts or comments that you'd like to share with the group, or drop it in the chat? Maybe some things that you notice, maybe some of your own.
I think beliefs and the thought about like the capacity for children to grow, are they competent, like are we presuming competence, has a lot to do with how teachers teach and interact with students as well. When they don't have that belief, and they're not presuming competence, they lower their expectations. They stop holding them to high expectations and say, oh, well, they can't do this. So let me do something for them that they can do, which in turn lowers those expectations, but also lowers the rigor, and lowers the ability for the child to even learn. And so if we're not presuming competence and we're not believing in our kids that they have the ability and the capability to do things, we're doing a disservice to them.
Thank you.
Hi, what stood out, I think it was, I forgot what slide it was, that high quality instruction. I think the belief has to be that all students can get there. And I think then it makes it, then all of the beliefs that you have, you know, based on culture and race or whatever beliefs you have, I think you can kind of put that aside if you believe that all students should have high quality instruction. You need to do whatever you need to do to make sure that they have it. That's how I feel like we should all, that mindset has to change.
Yeah. Anything popping up in the chat, Bridget, that you wanted to share? No, okay.
It's just me responding to people.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Awesome. Okay. Awesome. Let's keep rolling. It's because I know we're running out of time. So how does UDL align with DTGSS? So, we're thinking about DTGSS as that where all of these three things meet here. All of these things must be aligned for students to learn. The curriculum has to be, worthwhile at HQIM. We have to know whether students have learned what we want them to learn, and how students learn and how teachers teach, so that pedagogy piece. So all of these three things coming together. When we're talking about the Delaware Teacher Classroom Observation Framework, so here we're thinking about it's aligning the expectations for what high quality teaching and learning looks like for all students. So whether, no matter what buckets or groups of students we're talking about, we need to make sure that we have those high quality expectations, that everything is coming together here for those students. And we are collecting the evidence, the administration is collecting the evidence to assess that. So if you're an administrator, you're out collecting that evidence. If you are the teacher, in the classroom, you need to make sure that that evidence is there for our administrators to see that, and that they're able to provide the feedback that we need. So there are the three performance areas. So the learning environment, the engagement in learning, and the maximizing learning. So those are kind of those three big buckets that we're talking about here. And then each has three indicators. So that are the descriptors of the performance area. These descriptors articulate the teacher and student behaviors that an observer would see in the classroom. So, what is the teacher doing and what is the student doing? It's explicitly outlined for the evaluator. So I don't think we're going to have time for this, but I wanted to kind of talk you through what we were going to do because we're running out of time here. But when we're thinking about 2.1, which states the objectives for learning, there is these descriptions, okay? And then we have some possible activities. So when an administrator is out, what might they see? What are some things that they could see in the classroom for our objectives? So the verb, again, we talked about the verb, and then this is talking about the verb. The verb that the teacher chooses is super important. The goal is elaborated with text, cues, graphics, examples. That the goal is accessible, that they can all see it. And, it's not written really small, just so the teacher can say, yep, I got the goal there, that it's accessible and that everyone can read that. When when we're talking about learning experiences, you know, thinking about the differentiated activities that match the goal. So, you know, maybe again, everyone's working towards that goal, but getting there maybe in a different way. We have anchor charts, word walls that are utilized. And then lastly, the checks for understanding and feedback. So thinking about the type of feedback that the evaluators are giving, the type of feedback that the teacher is giving the students, and even the feedback that the students are giving other students can be outlined here. So I wanted to bring up this crosswalk tool. We have created this. So if, for instance, we worked in a school that was using the DTGSS, and we worked in a partnership with the administration when they were doing their walkthroughs and their evaluations. We actually went in with them because we had been working with the teachers for, we were in our 3rd year of working with those teachers, and we were using UDL language. The administration wanted to make sure that we were using the same type of language. So it was really a great experience. But so this is what the DTGSS looks like. So let's go down to 2, where we just talked about those examples. Here we go, 2.1. So we were just talking about the objectives for learning. So we did not touch levels 1 and 2. We really focused in on 3 and 4. So you can see after each of the descriptors here, you can see UDL 8.1, UDL 7.2, and we have them color coded so that when we're talking 8.1 is in green, we're talking about engagement. So this is just another tool that might help you. So for instance, you know, if you're curious, if you set let's say you're an administrator and you say, you know, we really need to work on this indicator here, 2.1. This is kind of going to be our goal here. You can refer the teacher to this section here. And if I go back here, 8.1 is heightened salience of goals and objectives. All of these checkpoints have a number associated with them. So as the teacher, you could say, you know, I don't really know what that looks like. I really need some support. You could click on 8.1 and read a little bit more about it. There's more research out there, some more information there. So we try to make it as user friendly as we could here. So we even have it just to show you here at the end. This piece, the core teacher skills for learning environment, we have it there as well. The core teacher skills for engagement and learning. So we really spent some time to make this a useful tool. We did not put it on the smart card because you can always refer back to the top. But lots of different supports here for you as hopefully as the teacher, because you're referring to this as well. And then if you are an administrator, there's lots of resources and support that you can provide the teacher here as well. What we were going to do was watch a video together and think about what the support could look like, what kind of feedback, but we don't have time. But if you wanted to do this later, you know, if you wanted to go in and take a look at it, this is one of the approved videos from the DTGSS that we were allowed to choose from. So you're welcome to look at that. I know that we went kind of quick. There we go. We were going to do that. We can't do that. Okay. I'm curious about next steps. How can you use what we have discussed today? So does anybody have any ideas of, you know, one thing that maybe you would do after our time together today? One thing that sparked your interest, one thing that you're like, oh, I think I can do that, or I think I would like to try that.
I think I'm going to, I like what you just sent to us, to share it, because I believe we're actually doing this at my school. So,
Oh, great.
yeah. So, but it's always good to get another perspective or to hear from
Mhm.
others. So I think just to share what I've learned today,
Good.
like my aha moments, like the way you said to look at that chart. I never looked at it that way. So that kind of like it sticks with me now. So
Great. Thank you.
yeah.
Anyone else have a next step, an action item you'd like to share? Like I said, please reach out. I will put my email in the chat, and Bridget can put hers in there as well. Reach out if you want some more resources or, different things. Again, this was just a real quick overview, but we're happy to share and help support you. So let's see. In summary, then let's sum this up. We discussed that UDL is a proactive framework that eliminates barriers within the curriculum. We talked about goals, variability, and the context, and that it aligns with current state and school initiatives, including the DTGSS. I would ask you to reflect on our goals that we set out, and your goal that you set for yourself as well. Want to make sure that we met all the goals and that you were, we provided for you what you needed. We do have a survey that we'd love for you to take. We love your feedback. It's not long, I promise. So this is a live link here as well as a QR code. So I want to make sure that we're able to give you a few minutes. I know the keynote speaker is starting at 2, so we want to make sure that you have a few minutes to run to the restroom or stand up and stretch or do whatever you need to do before the last part. So thank you so much for joining. We do appreciate it. UDL is a really fabulous framework. We believe wholeheartedly in it. So anything that we can do to support you in using that, please reach out. We're happy to help. So thank you for joining.
Thank you. You actually made it a lot easier to understand. Sometimes when you have professional developments,
Yeah,
at school, because we are using it, but it's so overwhelming sometimes in the beginning of the
is.
school year. And so this kind of like helped me break it down. And I'm like, okay, it makes it a little bit
I'm
easier.
so glad.
Yeah. So thank you.
Victoria, I think I remember you you're from Seaford, right? I remembered you. Yes, I remembered you.
I
It's
was
so
just
good
gonna
to see you. Yes.
good to see you. Good to see you. I was actually just gonna speak up about that. That's again, I have nothing more but positivity. Even the group that I happen to have been in with, I was sharing with them that I've been to that UDL training. I said I know it's been a couple of years, but number one, this was a nice refresher for me. I do continue to still use those lesson plan templates. I just want to say I'm still in the immersion program. I do still utilize them. If anything, especially the barrier part, I wrote down that quote that happened to hit this time here as for why I do what I do in regards to the barriers. But I remember even back then about the chapter books, like being in second grade and we got these children reading chapter books. And I remember saying to you guys about, well, how can I kind of, again, rather than the excuse being anymore that, oh, they can't read this or this is too difficult, a story map and got visuals and pictures for each one of those chapters. Not that it replays everything like word for word, but just the fact that I've eliminated that barrier. So rather than saying that, okay, even they couldn't read the words, but I was able to provide them visuals so that way they still get insight and they still know what's going on in the story.
Awesome.
Have those you do posters right up on my wall. I still very much happen to follow the format.
Yeah.
And the notated about the why, the what, and the how. Actually, before I even begin my lessons now, I've taken that and I've sort of turned it into their criteria statement for success. So I always start off talking like, what are we learning about? Why are we learning this? And how will you know that you are going to be successful at the end? How will you know that you've actually
That's awesome.
accomplished this? So I've been using that in both manners. So UDL is still with me. I just wanted this nice little
So
refresher.
are you still teaching second grade?
Mhm.
Okay,
Still
good.
in second grade,
Yeah,
still
good
in
for you.
still in the immersion
Okay.
program. And the only thing I think for me is now that you happen to have mentioned, now that you guys have aligned with the DTGSS, I'm always into it. Nicole Ickes is actually my assistant principal, by the way.
Okay.
But you remember how it happened to have been mentioned, like you guys looked at those areas of 3 and 4s, and I'm always like, you know, literally I'm a 3. Okay, so I'm putting in the work, I'm getting what's supposed to be here, but I'm always trying to strive for that next thing, like what can
Sure.
get me to this 4, and it's the student ownership part of it all.
That's the
You know,
biggest piece
now
about that
that
score. Yeah.
so I will say, if people do happen to take to UDL or do follow it, they can get the same successful results, and you can hit a lot of 3s based on that. But for me now, my next steps is looking for how can I apply this to that level 4 is where I'm taking the UDL at right now.
You're
So
like the
that was what I
UDL
was
poster
going to get
child,
from.
Victoria. You're like the poster
So yeah,
child.
I'm gonna say you're an amazing sales pitch. Keep it up.
That's right. I know. That's so great. Well, it's so good to see you.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
you take
Thanks for
care.
joining
It was
us.
good to see you as well. I'm glad to see that it is still going. But yes, I wasn't even encouraging them. I told them, I say, hey, if you guys need some resources, I said, I still got my resources from when I went to that course. But yeah,
So great.
Awesome.
Will you take care, Victoria? So good to see you.
all right. You
All
too,
right.
ladies. Bye.
Right.
Thank you. All right.